I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The corner cafe smelled like burnt sugar and wet newspaper that morning, the kind of place I came to when I wanted to be invisible. I was halfway through scrolling my phone when she appeared behind the counter, wiping her hands on a faded apron. "Hey, Matt," she said, just like that, like she had been expecting me all along. I paused mid-swipe, blinking. You remembered," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. "Of course," she replied, tilting her head with that faint, easy smile that made the corners of her eyes crinkle. "Medium latte, right?" I nodded, and for a second, the world outside the glass door, the buses, the screaming kids, the wind tugging at my jacket, didn't matter. She moved around the counter with a quiet grace, and I found myself noticing things I shouldn't. The way her hands folded the napkins, careful and deliberate, or the silver bracelet that caught the morning light. I've been coming here for weeks, usually at the same time, and somehow she remembered. She always remembered. The barista before her didn't care if I came back or not. She did, and that was different. Comforting. Strange. "You've got a test today?" she asked, nodding at the textbook I'd set on the chair next to me. "Yeah, just nothing special," I muttered. My hands twisted around the cup once it landed in front of me, thumbs brushing against the rim. She leaned slightly closer, just enough for her voice to lower, but not enough to cross any line. "Don't stress too much. You always think it's worse than it is." I laughed quietly, the sound awkward in my own ears. "You talk like you know me." "Maybe I do," she said, with a shrug that seemed casual, but not really. Her eyes flicked briefly to my hands, and I swear I felt my own glance linger too long, like a guilty confession I couldn't speak. I was used to talking to no one. Unsent texts sat on my phone like tiny regrets, half-written, never sent. My thoughts paused on empty streets, waiting for something to feel like it belonged to me. And now she was here, remembering, noticing, making space for me in ways I hadn't even realized I'd wanted. We didn't say much after that, just the quiet hum of the espresso machine, the occasional clink of spoons against ceramic. I watched her straighten a chair for a couple who just walked in, her movements careful but casual, and I felt something in my chest tighten and then loosen all at once. It wasn't longing exactly. Not yet. It was recognition. A gentle friction, like the quiet sound of a page turning in a book you didn't mean to start. When it was time to leave, I lingered near the door, hands in pockets, trying to make my exit look natural. She caught my eyes over the counter and waved slightly, and I almost missed the small, folded note she had slipped under my cup earlier. My name in neat handwriting. I picked it up with one hand, curling the edges between my fingers. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, breathing in the smell of coffee and sugar, feeling absurdly small and absurdly seen at the same time. "See you tomorrow," she called as I shuffled toward the door. "Yeah, see you tomorrow," I replied, though part of me wasn't sure if I could trust myself to come back, or if I even wanted to. I stepped outside, the note warm in my hand, and the wind caught my jacket just right, tugging me forward. I didn't notice the bus pass me until it was too late. But the paper in my pocket, her handwriting, made me pause, made me consider walking back. And that's when my phone buzzed. A new message from her. The next afternoon, I found her in the kitchen of her apartment, the smell of baking bread curling around the small space. I'd been helping her carry groceries, but mostly I just stood in the doorway, pretending to reach for a jar while watching her move around the counter. "Your mom said you're serious about photography," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice had that quiet ease again, the kind that made me forget to answer immediately. "I guess," I said, shrugging. "Mostly it's just pictures of streets, light hitting walls. Nothing exciting." She smiled, not mockingly, just soft. "I like that. Ordinary things, captured in a way that matters to someone. That's brave in its own way." I felt my ears heat up. Brave. I don't know if I'd call it that. Her hands paused over the bread dough. She looked down, then back at me, with a flicker of something I couldn't name. "I used to take photos when I was your age," she said. "In college, I tried to make sense of everything with a camera. Never got far, though. Life gets in the way." Her confession hung between us, not loud, but heavy in its quietness. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt thick. So I just nodded, pretending my silence was conversation. There was a pause. I watched her brush flour off her hands, and my eyes kept returning to the small lines at the corner of her smile, the way her hair caught the light by the window. I felt ridiculous for noticing. "You don't talk about your family much," she said softly. I shrugged again. "It's fine. Complicated. Nothing worth saying." "Complicated is sometimes worth saying," she offered, folding the bread dough with patient fingers. "You don't have to say it all, but you can say some." I thought about texting her, confessing some small fragment of what I actually felt, but the words died in my head. We both knew the complication here. She was my friend's mom, divorced, 45, maybe more, carrying herself like the weight of years without letting it crush her. Me, 21, fumbling through jobs and small failures, trying to feel like I belonged somewhere. We didn't speak for a while. I poured the tea she had set on the counter, my fingers brushing hers briefly. She didn't pull away. I sat on the worn stool, watching her knead the dough again, and imagined what it would be like to tell her everything. To touch her hand properly, to lean too close and not care. But the thought was dangerous and ridiculous, so I tucked it back where it belonged. Then she turned, holding a small teacup toward me with that faint, knowing smile. "Here," she said. "You're supposed to drink it before it gets cold." Our fingers brushed over the cup. I felt a spark, tiny and fleeting, but enough to make the silence between us feel electric. She looked at me for just a beat longer than necessary, her eyes soft but unreadable, and I thought maybe she noticed it too. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Here's the 500-word continuation, building tension, hesitation, and near confession, Kitako style. The next Saturday, I showed up at her apartment again, notebook under my arm, pretending it was just another study session. She was already there, rearranging the cushions on the couch, humming softly to herself. I hesitated in the doorway, noticing the way sunlight caught the edges of her hair. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded flat, like I was testing it. "Hey," she replied, glancing up and smiling. "Coffee." I nodded. She moved to the kitchen. I followed, but not too close, careful of invisible lines. She poured 2 cups, hands brushing mine for a fraction of a second. I froze. She didn't flinch. We sat on the couch, quiet at first. I fiddled with the spiral of my notebook, flipping pages without really looking at them. She traced the rim of her cup with her finger, her thumb flicking lightly over the surface, almost like a small, private rhythm. "So, how's your friend?" she asked. Casual, neutral, but something in her eyes, quick glance down, then back, made me feel like she was testing me, seeing if I'd falter. "Fine." "Busy," I said. "Short." "Too short." I wanted to say more, to tell her that nothing about anything felt fine, but stayed in my chest, stuck. She leaned back, curling one leg under her, and stared out the window. "I saw him yesterday," she said. "At the park." She paused. "He mentioned you." I didn't know how to respond. My fingers traced the edge of my notebook again. The silence stretched, filled with the faint hum of the radiator and the tick of the clock on the wall. I felt a rush of something, warmth, maybe, or longing, or the ache of being noticed too much. I wanted to say something stupid to test her too, but I couldn't. Instead, I said, "I should probably get going soon." My voice sounded thin, even to me. "Already?" Her eyes flicked toward me, hesitant, like she wanted to argue, but didn't. I shifted on the couch, unsure how close was too close. "Yeah, homework. Family stuff. You know." I trailed off, realizing the words were meaningless, but they bought me time. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Right." She didn't press, didn't move closer either. Just sat there, a presence I could feel, heavy and soft at the same time. We stayed like that for a while. My hand brushed the edge of the notebook again. Her knee nearly touched mine under the coffee table. I needed to lean in to bridge that tiny gap. But I stopped, caught between desire and caution. Then the door clicked. Someone's footsteps, my friend, I assumed, on the stairwell outside. I flinched, and she looked up, startled. Just for a second, our eyes met. And in that beat, I could feel it, The pull, the hesitation, the almost confession that neither of us would voice. My heart thudded, and I realized how close we had come. Too close. I didn't kiss her. She didn't lean away. But the space between us seemed smaller than the room itself, charged and impossible, holding everything we hadn't said. I didn't see her for 3 days. Not a text, not a note, nothing. I kept walking past the cafe, staring at the counter, imagining her hands moving over the espresso machine. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe she was busy. But when I passed the park on Thursday evening and saw her sitting on her usual bench, the sunlight catching her hair, I realized I'd been holding my breath without knowing it. She looked up as I approached, and I saw it immediately, distance in her eyes. Not cold, exactly. Just careful, guarded. "Hey," I said, my voice uneven. "Hey," she replied, and for a moment, I wanted to lean in and just break the space between us. But she didn't. We sat on the bench, side by side, not touching. I fiddled with a loose thread on my sleeve, watching the way the leaves moved across the sidewalk. The silence was heavy. "You haven't been around," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. "I had stuff," I said, words flat. I didn't mention the nights I spent staring at my phone, imagining her note, imagining her smile. She nodded once, eyes fixed on the horizon. I wasn't sure if you wanted to see me. Something in me ached. "Of course I do," I said too quickly, my fingers curling into fists in my pockets. She exhaled slowly, like letting air out of a balloon that had been holding too much pressure. I don't want this to be weird," she admitted. I swallowed, my throat tight. "It's not weird," I said, though I couldn't stop the truth from threading into my voice. "It is." Her hand twitched, almost reaching toward mine, then retracted. She stopped, paused, looked down at the bench. "I'm not sure I should be doing this." The words hit me like a sudden chill. And yet, I didn't move away. I leaned slightly closer, careful, hesitant. Doing what? She glanced at me, eyes shimmering faintly in the light. Us. Spending time like more than... I shouldn't. Her voice trailed off, and she closed her eyes briefly, pressing her palms to her knees as if holding herself together. I wanted to tell her everything, that I'd imagined holding her hand 100 times, that I'd been jealous of every little distraction in her life, that I was tired of pretending I could walk away and still breathe normally. But instead, I just said, "I get it." Her eyes flicked up, searching mine, maybe for reassurance, maybe for permission. And then she shifted, leaning back slightly, distancing herself in a way that made the space between us feel enormous. We stayed like that, quiet, the city moving around us, but neither of us moving closer. I wanted to reach out, to bridge it, but my hand hovered in midair, unsure. And then she asked, almost inaudibly, "Do you even know what you want?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat closed, and all I could do was look at her, imagining the impossible, wishing I could speak it aloud. The wind caught a fallen leaf and pushed it between us. I watched it slide along the bench and thought about how small gestures could hold everything we were afraid to say. I didn't hear from her all weekend. Not a call, not a text, nothing. By Monday, I had convinced myself that she had moved on, that the quiet distance wasn't just caution, but a line drawn too clearly for me to cross. That evening, I walked past the cafe on instinct. She was there, speaking softly with someone at the counter. A man. I didn't catch his face at first, just the tilt of her head, the way she laughed, light, unguarded, the kind of laughter I hadn't heard in weeks. My chest tightened. I slowed. The man left, and she looked over her shoulder, finally noticing me. Her smile faltered just a little, like a door half open, unsure whether to invite me in or leave me outside. "Hey," she said, voice careful. "Hey," I replied, trying not to betray the jolt that ran through me. "Do you want to sit?" she asked, gesturing to the small corner table by the window. I nodded. We sat, not touching. I noticed almost immediately a framed photo on the counter behind her, a boy, maybe 8 or 9, grinning at the camera. I didn't know whose child it was, and for a second, I felt like an intruder in someone else's world. "Matt," she said softly, almost catching me in mid-thought. I didn't tell you about him. I blinked. The cup of my hands felt suddenly heavier. Him. My son, she admitted, letting the words linger like a cautious confession. She paused, eyes not meeting mine. He comes first. Always. You're different. But I can't pretend he doesn't exist. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. But my chest felt tight, and the quiet ache I had carried for weeks sharpened into something raw, unfamiliar. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that I could navigate it, but I couldn't. The weight of the unspoken rules pressed down on both of us. She poured a second cup of coffee, more for me than herself, and set it in front of me. Her hands lingered on the handle, and I thought I saw hesitation there, like she wanted to reach closer but feared the consequences. We spoke in fragments about trivial things, work, the weather, the cafe's new pastry, but the elephant in the room grew with every pause. I imagined what it would be like to reach across and touch her hand, to speak the words I hadn't said yet, but every scenario ended with her pulling back, a reality I couldn't ignore. Eventually, I left, my backpack heavier than when I walked in. She didn't walk me to the door. She didn't wave. She just stood behind the counter, folding a napkin slowly, deliberately, like she was trying to occupy herself with something ordinary to hide the tension. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like someone had hit stop on a movie right before the climax. My phone buzzed later that night. A message draft from her stared back at me, unsent. I wish it could be easier. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. And for a long while, the screen stayed dark. The seat in the cafe left empty in my imagination, the coffee cold on the table that neither of us returned to. I found her in the kitchen again, late afternoon. The light was soft, almost lazy, pouring in through the half-open blinds and dusting the counters with gold. I hesitated in the doorway, gripping my backpack strap, wondering if I had the courage to step all the way in. She looked up from a mug she was holding. "You came," she said, simple, as if noticing my presence was the only acknowledgement needed. "Yeah," I replied, voice low, unsure if it sounded too eager or not enough. I shifted from one foot to the other, folding and unfolding my hands. She leaned against the counter, silent for a beat. I've been thinking about the last few weeks." I nodded, fingers tightening around the strap. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out, then filled with something sharp and unfamiliar. "Me too," I said, almost whispering, and realized how much that simple admission cost me to voice. She set her mug down and ran a hand through her hair. "I don't want to make things complicated." Or, she paused, catching herself, mess things up. I wanted to tell her that it was already messy, that I had thought about her every night, about her smile, the way she made ordinary moments feel precise and heavy. But I didn't. I just watched her, letting the silence carry my confession for me. She stepped closer, though still careful. "You're young." And she hesitated. "I have a life, responsibilities, a child." I nodded again, swallowing hard. "I know. I've thought about that." My hands hovered uselessly at my sides. I don't want to make things harder." She gave a small, almost imperceptible laugh, bitter and soft at the same time. "Do you want to leave it all unsaid?" I looked down at the floor, imagining every scenario. My hand brushing hers, a door closing, a phone left unanswered. And then I lifted my eyes and met hers. "No," I said quietly. I just want to be honest. That's all." Her shoulders eased slightly, like she had been holding a weight without knowing it. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on the counter between us. Not a grasp, not a reach for me, just there. And somehow that small gesture said more than either of us could put into words. I exhaled slow, almost painfully letting it out. "Okay," I said. My voice was flat but steady. Her lips curved in the smallest hint of smile. Not triumphant, not romantic, just human, solid and real. For a while, we stood there, side by side, the kitchen quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the distant sound of traffic. No declarations, no promises, no grand gestures, just presence, the kind that carries everything unsaid, the weight of decisions made, and the tiny risk of being fully seen. I felt the tension drain from my chest. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough that I could imagine coming back tomorrow, or the next day, or maybe just being here now without needing more. And for a second, it felt like a choice had been made. Not about love, not about future, not about forever. Just about this moment. She tilted her head toward me. Okay, she said, softly, quietly. I smiled back. Just a small, human smile. Weeks passed. I stopped counting the days I didn't hear from her and started noticing the ones I did. Saturday mornings became a quiet rhythm. 8:47 a.m. Exactly when I'd slide into the corner of the cafe and she'd set a black coffee in front of me without asking. Just like always, except now the pause between us wasn't heavy. It had weight, yes, but the good kind. Familiar, grounding. Sometimes she'd tuck a small note under the cup. Don't forget your gloves, or you left your notebook. And I'd read it and smile, tracing the letters with my thumb, feeling that tiny friction of attention that had always meant more than I could explain. Other times, we walked to the park, the same bench waiting for us. The autumn leaves swept along the paths, the same ones I had imagined all those months ago, and we'd sit there, quiet, watching people pass. No words needed. She'd fold her hands over her knees, I'd twist the strap of my backpack, and just like that, life felt a little fuller. I learned the rhythm of her apartment, the way she poured tea for herself before remembering me, the soft click of the fridge door, the hum of the radiator in the evenings. I never had to ask if it was okay to be there. I just was, and she let me be. That was enough. There were days when the past still pulled at me. The near misses, the unsent messages, the pauses that had felt infinite. But the memory of them didn't sting anymore. It settled into the kind of ache that felt like history, like proof that something had changed, grown, endured.